decided to read 24 books for 2024, and I read a good mix of fiction, nonfiction, literary fiction, and memoirs, and I can't wait to share all of these reviews with you, especially because there were a lot of 5-star reads this year. So let's get started. Starting off with my favorite read of the year, I gave this book 5 stars, and that is Firefly Lane by Kristen Hanna. I love this book. I love the way it was written. It's about friendship and just how important it is, and I really like that book. It was my favorite read of the year. One of the first books that I read this year is Atomic Habits by James Clear. I really like this book. It is about the psychology behind habits and how to build habits in a way that will stick. He talks a lot about habit stacking and finding ways to implement habits into your life. If you are trying to implement some habits, this is a great book. I know that there's a lot of podcasts and material out there that presents his ideas. I'd say the first 2/3 of the book are really insightful about habits, and then the last part is just additional information. So I do recommend this book. This year I also read Everything I Know About Love by Dolly Alderton. I really didn't get much out of this memoir, so I just really don't think that this was for me, but I know a lot of people that really like this book. Over the summer, I read a lot of fun beach reads, so one of those was Happy Place by Emily Henry. I read this at the beach, and I thought it was a really fun beach read. If you're looking for something light to read when you are going on a trip, I definitely recommend Happy Place. And another book I read was Abby Jimenez, Just for the Summer. I really like this book. I thought it was so fun. I gave it 5 stars, I believe, and it is the perfect beach read. One of the other books I read was We Were Liars. I think I would have liked this book if I would have read it a few years ago, just because it is a very simplistic young adult book, and I read it in a day. It's a very quick read, but I think I would have liked this book if I would have read it a few years ago. I also read the second and third books to the Shatter Me series. This is a science fiction young adult series that is really easy to follow. Again, though, I think I would have liked this if I would have read it a few years ago, just because the writing is a bit more simplistic. I also read Comfort and Joy by Kristen Hanna during the Christmas season. It is a very brief holiday fable. If you're looking for something seasonal that is quick and easy to read, then this is the book for you. One of the more recent books I read is Book Lovers by Emily Henry. I really like the characters and that it was a publishing agent and a editor. I thought it was really fun and a really easy read. Another book I read this year is How the Irish Saved Civilization. I read this for a Western civilization class, and I think the author makes a really good argument. He argues that the Irish are accredited for saving Western civilization and helping with the rise of medieval Europe, and I think that it is a very interesting argument. If you're into history or the development of the medieval world, I think that this is the book for you. I read Wild Love by Elsie Silver this year, and it's just really not my kind of book. I really did not like it, but I know that it's not for everyone. Another book I read this year is Normal People by Sally Rooney. Even though the book is short, it is a book that takes a while to read because the characters are very complex. I think Sally Rooney does a really good job of explaining her characters and picking very complex characters to use in her writing. Another book I read is The Psychology of Money. This book elaborates on how money is perceived, and I learned a lot about money from this book, and it is very insightful. Another book I read is The Wall of Winnipeg and Me. This was one of my favorite reads. It is a slow burn romance that I thought was super fun, such a fun read. Another book I read is A Novel Love Story. I thought this book was a cozy read, but I felt like it was really repetitive and I didn't really follow the plot that well, so if you're looking for a cozy read where there's not that much drama, this is a good book. Another book I read is The Dip, which talks about when to quit and when to keep going. It's insightful, but it's information that you could find online. This year I also read Better Than the Movies, and this is such a fun young adult romance. If you're looking for an easy light read, this book is so fun. And it's just such a good book. I really liked it. Another book I read is In the Garden of Beasts by Eric Larson, and this author took a lot of historical information and then turned it into a narrative that we could follow, which I thought was really interesting. I ended up annotating this book. This year I also read Angela's Ashes, and this book, the writing style is amazing, and I think this author did a really good job of explaining his childhood from the perspective of his age, and I really like this book. It's devastating, it's heartbreaking, but it's very insightful. This year, the TV show A Good Girl's Guide to Murder came out, and so I got the book to read before I watched the show. I really loved this book. I thought it was such a fun, easy read, and it was so fun to follow along, and the plot wasn't super predictable, so I really liked this one, and I think this is great for a fun mystery or thriller. One of the first books that I read this year was Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. I really liked this book. I had to read it for school. I ended up annotating the book, and I think that it was just a really good classic, and I took a lot from it. I had to write a few papers on it. And last but not least, we have One Day. This is one of my favorite books ever. It follows two characters over a very long period of time, and this book is heartbreaking, but it's just really insightful, and I really like this writer's style and the way that he elaborates on these characters. I recommend this book to all of my friends, and it's just such a good read. So those are all the books that I read for 2024. I definitely read from a mix of genres and got some pretty good 5-star reads this year. So thank you for listening to my book review.